They buried him, didn't they? In silence, in shame, in whispers. They said he was done, finished, forgotten. They said heaven had taken him because he failed, because he lost, because he didn't fit their picture of victory. They laughed when he disappeared, called it karma, called it justice, called it over. But they forgot something. Heaven doesn't waste survivors. Sometimes it takes you out, not to end you, but to rewire you. Sometimes it buries you just to prove that you can rise without anyone's permission. See, what they don't understand is that when heaven sends someone back, they don't come back soft. They don't come back the same. They come back quiet, sharper, dangerous. The kind of dangerous that doesn't roar anymore. It just watches, plans, and moves. Because the fall taught them everything the world tried to hide. Pain became their teacher. Loss became their language. And silence became their weapon. Heaven never sends someone back without a mission. When you've been through the kind of fire that strips away your ego, your illusions, your comfort, you don't return the same. You come back with purpose in your eyes and silence in your soul. The kind of silence that carries weight, the kind that speaks louder than words ever could. You see things differently after you've been broken. You start to understand why it all had to fall apart. Every betrayal, every delay, every night you spent asking, why me? It was all part of your redesign. Heaven doesn't recycle weakness. It refines warriors. It doesn't send you back to prove a point. It sends you back to fulfill one. You thought it was over when everything was taken. You thought the story ended when the lights went out. But that's the thing. Endings don't exist for people chosen to rise. What felt like death was only transformation in disguise. You were being rebuilt in private, while the world laughed in public. They thought your silence was defeat, but it was actually your cocoon. They thought your distance meant you gave up, but you were only gathering your strength. Heaven doesn't rush restoration. It waits until the scars tell a story strong enough to speak for you. When heaven sends someone back, they come with eyes that see through the fake. They've learned to read the truth between smiles, to feel energy before words. They can't be fooled anymore. The same tricks that broke them once don't work now. They've learned what real looks like. Pain taught them discernment. Loss taught them patience. Silence taught them power. They no longer chase approval because they've already faced rejection and survived it. They don't seek validation because they've learned that real worth doesn't need applause. When heaven sends you back, it's not for recognition. It's for execution. You start to move differently. You don't react. You respond. You don't rush. You observe. You're not desperate for opportunities anymore because you finally understand that what's meant for you won't need to be begged for. You've seen how heaven works. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It aligns. It positions. It orchestrates. You realize that everything you lost was simply clearing the stage for what's next. People left because they weren't part of the next scene. Doors closed because they were too small for where you're going. Heaven doesn't waste movement. Every silence, every setback, every delay was divine choreography. And now, when you return, you walk with a different kind of peace. Not the peace that comes from things being easy, but the kind that comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. That quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've already met the worst version of yourself and you didn't stay there. You've seen the bottom and you didn't drown. You've faced the fire and you didn't burn. You carry proof in your presence. You don't even have to explain anymore. People can feel it, that weight, that authority, that calm chaos in your energy. It's the mark of someone who's been rebuilt by something greater than pain. When heaven sends someone back, it's never to blend in. You weren't restored to fit into the same rooms that rejected you. You weren't rebuilt to play small again. You carry divine timing inside you now. You've become a mirror. When people look at you, they see their excuses reflected back at them. You expose comfort. You challenge weakness. You remind others of what's possible. And that makes people uncomfortable. They'll whisper again, question you again, try to drag your past back into the light. But it won't touch you this time, because what broke you before doesn't have access to who you are now. You outgrew the version of yourself that used to flinch at their words. Your return isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving heaven right. Every tear, every season of isolation, every unanswered question was evidence that you were chosen for more. You were pulled away to be recalibrated. Heaven doesn't send soldiers into battle without sharpening their blades. That's what the pain was, sharpening. That's what the silence was, training. That's what the waiting was, alignment. And now that you're back, you realize something profound. The mission isn't to rebuild what was lost, but to build what never existed before. You come back understanding that the assignment is bigger than revenge, bigger than validation, bigger than success. You've become a vessel, a messenger, a living contradiction, proof that divine delays aren't denials. You embody resilience. You've become living evidence that heaven doesn't forget who it's invested in. When you walk now, heaven moves with you. You feel it. In the timing, in the peace, in the way doors open without you forcing them. You realize you were never waiting on heaven. Heaven was waiting on you. Because when heaven sends someone back, it's not to restart their story. It's to rewrite the world's version of it. You were sent back with truth in your scars, purpose in your silence, and fire in your bones. Everything that tried to end, you only introduced you to the version of yourself that cannot be broken again. The fall was never failure. It was the classroom heaven used to strip away everything fake about you. You thought it was punishment. You thought it was rejection. You thought life was breaking you down. But really, it was breaking you open. That fall was never random. It was surgical, precise. Designed to expose what you were depending on that was never meant to hold you. You called it loss. Heaven called it training. Every time you were betrayed, abandoned, misunderstood. That was your strength being built. That was your armor being forged. Heaven doesn't send warriors untested. You can't fight with a soft heart that's never been cracked. You can't carry purpose with hands that haven't bled. You see, everyone loves the idea of being chosen until they realize what it costs. The spotlight feels good until the fire starts. You prayed for power, and heaven answered with pressure. You asked for growth, and heaven gave you pain. Because that's how heaven works. It never gives you blessings in comfort. It gives you lessons in chaos. It teaches you endurance through storms. You don't become unshakable by being treated gently. You become unshakable by losing everything that made you fragile. That's what the fall was doing. Pulling out the weakness you wouldn't let go of on your own. When you were down there, when you thought it was over, something started to shift. The noise stopped. The distractions faded. All the fake smiles, the temporary friends, the hollow validation, gone. And suddenly it was just you, alone, exposed. That's when heaven started speaking. Not through voices, not through miracles, through silence, through the stillness that made you face the version of yourself you'd been running from. That was the real test, not surviving the fall, but facing yourself in it, seeing your reflection without the mask, admitting what needed to die inside you for the real you to live. You learned what kind of strength silence builds. The kind that doesn't brag, doesn't beg, doesn't break. The kind that sits in the darkness, feels the pain, and still whispers, "I'm not done." You became your own rescue. You stopped waiting for someone to pick you up and started standing on your own. You found out that rock bottom isn't the end. It's the foundation. It's where you stopped performing and started becoming. It's where you discovered that the fall didn't destroy you. It introduced you to who you really are. You see, the fall has a way of revealing your addictions. Not to substances, but to control, to comfort, to approval. You thought you needed people to believe in you. But heaven wanted you to believe in yourself. You thought you needed validation, but heaven wanted you to build conviction. So it took it all away, not to hurt you, but to free you. Because sometimes the only way to teach you strength is to remove everything you thought was keeping you safe. When you're being trained, heaven doesn't explain. It just applies pressure. It lets the pain shape you. Every loss becomes a lesson. Every delay becomes direction. Every heartbreak becomes a higher calling. You learn to stop asking, "Why me?" and start asking, "What now?" Because the truth is, you weren't being punished. You were being prepared. The old version of you couldn't carry what's coming next. It was too emotional, too reactive, too dependent on approval. So heaven put you through a season that felt like destruction, but was actually preparation. You stopped chasing what was never meant to stay. You stopped trying to make people see your worth. The fall taught you that validation is cheap and peace is priceless. That sometimes you have to lose everything fake to gain one thing real. And when you finally stood back up, you didn't rise the same. You rose quieter, stronger, smarter. The kind of strength that doesn't flinch when things fall apart again. Because now you understand the pattern. You understand that nothing real ever leaves. The fall made you dangerous in the best way. It killed your need for approval. It erased your fear of starting over. It taught you that being broken isn't the end. It's the beginning of becoming indestructible. Now you move differently. You don't react to noise. You don't chase validation. You don't seek revenge. You've seen too much to waste your energy on proving points. You've learned that silence is louder than words, and peace is stronger than power. When heaven sent you back, it didn't send you to repeat what was lost. It sent you to rise above it. You're not fragile anymore. You don't need their permission, their understanding, their applause. You've already survived what most couldn't handle. That's your training. That's your proof. The fall wasn't the end of your story. It was the rewriting of it. Every scar became scripture. Every wound became wisdom. And now, when you move, you don't move like someone who fell. You move like someone who learned how to fly without the ground ever needing to understand how. Silence rebuilt what pain destroyed. That's the part they'll never understand. That the silence they mistook for weakness was actually where everything inside you was being reborn. When you stopped talking, when you stopped explaining, when you finally stopped trying to prove your side of the story, that's when heaven started rebuilding you. In the quiet, after all the noise died down, after everyone left, after the chaos ended, you began to hear yourself again. Not the version that was performing, pretending, or surviving, the real one. The one buried under years of noise, guilt, and noise disguised as love. Pain tore it all apart. It stripped you of your identity, your safety, your certainty. It left you standing in the ruins of everything you thought you needed. That's what pain does. It destroys illusions first. It takes everything fake and rips it away until only the truth remains. You thought you were breaking down, but you were being stripped clean. The silence wasn't punishment. It was reconstruction. Heaven knew that as long as you were surrounded by noise, you'd never truly hear your purpose. So it quieted everything. The calls stopped, the messages stopped, the attention disappeared, and suddenly, there was no one left to distract you from yourself. At first, the silence was unbearable. You kept reaching for something to fill it. People, validation, old habits, anything to drown out the emptiness. But the more you tried, the louder the truth became. The truth that you'd been living too fast, chasing too hard, pretending too well. You were surviving on noise. And when heaven took it away, you mistook peace for loneliness. That's how disconnected you had become. But slowly, the silence started to heal you. You began to understand that quiet doesn't mean absence. It means clarity. It means you're finally in a space where lies can't hide anymore. In silence, you started to see who you'd become while trying to please everyone else. You started to recognize how much of your strength was performance. How much of your peace depended on people's opinions. How often you kept smiling while dying inside. The silence held up a mirror you couldn't look away from. It made you face the parts of yourself you kept running from. The insecurity, the anger, the guilt, the grief. And though it hurt, you stayed. Because for once, you weren't trying to escape it. You were learning from it. You were letting it teach you instead of trying to numb it. That's when the rebuilding began. Quietly. Invisibly. The kind of rebuilding that doesn't make a sound but changes everything. You stopped chasing closure and started creating distance. You stopped demanding understanding and started finding peace. You realized that not everything broken needs to be fixed. Some things just need to be left behind. You learned to protect your energy like it was sacred, because now you understood that not everyone deserves access to your peace. You started speaking less, listening more, and letting silence do the talking for you. Pain had destroyed your trust, your hope, your faith in people, but silence restored it, not in them, but in yourself. You stopped waiting for someone to save you, and remembered that you were never powerless. You just forgot your strength while trying to carry everyone else's weight. Silence reminded you of that strength. It reminded you that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just breathes, watches, and waits. That's what made you dangerous now. Your ability to sit in stillness without losing your mind. You learned how to find peace, even when everything around you was falling apart. You see, silence teaches discipline. It makes you realize how much energy you use to waste explaining yourself, defending yourself, trying to prove your worth to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stopped doing that. You stopped needing to be seen. You stopped needing to be right. You started to understand that not every storm deserves your thunder. Sometimes the best response is stillness. Silence rebuilt your confidence in a way words never could. It made you patient, observant, untouchable. You started to feel power in doing nothing, in saying nothing, in letting truth reveal itself in time. The world thinks healing looks loud, tears, speeches, declarations. But real healing is quiet. It happens in the moments no one sees. It happens when you wake up and don't feel the weight you carried yesterday. It happens when you realize you can be at peace without closure, without revenge, without anyone apologizing. That's what silence gave you. The ability to move on without needing an audience. The ability to exist without needing to explain your peace. When silence rebuilt you, it gave you new eyes. You started to see through people. You started to notice energy instead of words. You could tell who was genuine, who was draining, who was pretending. You stopped engaging with chaos because you recognized the peace you'd fought too hard to find. You stopped responding to the things that used to provoke you because you realized that not everything deserves access to your peace. You came back from that silence unrecognizable. Not louder, not angrier, but sharper, still, a calm storm. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You've been rebuilt in the dark, and now your presence alone says everything that needs to be said. Pain destroyed what was fake. Silence rebuilt what was real. And now you don't seek peace. You are peace. The kind that can't be shaken. The kind that doesn't need validation. the kind that comes only from surviving your own noise and choosing not to go back. Funny thing about pain. It doesn't just break you, it rearranges you. It takes everything you thought you were and scatters it across the floor, piece by piece. And when you finally start putting yourself back together, you realize some parts don't fit anymore. Some pieces were never yours to begin with. You were carrying what others left behind. Their expectations, their guilt, their fear, and you wore it like it was your skin. That's why when it all fell apart, it wasn't destruction, it was purification. You were losing what was never meant to stay. You see, everyone wants transformation, but no one wants the pain that causes it. They want the glory without the grind, the peace without the storm, the wisdom without the wounds. But it doesn't work that way. The only way heaven rebuilds a person is by letting the old version die. Every disappointment, every betrayal, every sleepless night, it wasn't random. It was surgery. Unseen, uninvited, but necessary. You begged for strength. And heaven answered by removing your crutches. You wanted to know your worth, so everything that didn't value you had to walk away. You thought it was punishment, but it was preparation. It's strange, isn't it, how you only start to understand purpose when everything falls apart. How the most painful chapters end up being the ones that shape you the most. It's almost poetic. How you had to be broken to finally see what was real. You learned that some things fall apart so something stronger can rise in their place. That not all endings are tragedies. Some are transformations wearing a disguise. When people left, when doors closed, when you were pushed to the edge, heaven wasn't abandoning you. It was isolating you, molding you, breaking the noise around you, so you could finally hear your own heartbeat again. That isolation wasn't loneliness. It was alignment. You were being recalibrated. The people who misunderstood you, the opportunities that vanished, the silence that surrounded you, all of it was rearrangement. Because when heaven is about to elevate someone, it first removes distractions. It strips everything that doesn't belong where you're going. And that stripping hurts. It feels unfair. It feels like you're being punished for trying. But what you don't see is that every loss was a form of protection. You were never losing anything real. You were only shedding illusions. The rebuilding doesn't happen in front of applause. It happens in the dark, where no one sees the fight. It happens when you cry and still get up the next day. It happens when you want to quit but don't. It's in those small, invisible moments where heaven sees your persistence and whispers, "Keep going." And even though you can't hear it, your spirit does. That's why you're still standing. Because something deep inside you knows this pain isn't the end. It's the transition. People talk about miracles like they're sudden, but they forget that most miracles are built in silence. Slowly, painfully, patiently. You've been building one without even realizing it. Every time you chose forgiveness over revenge, peace over chaos, discipline over comfort, you were building it. Every time you walked away instead of reacting, every time you stayed soft in a world that tried to harden you. That was the miracle forming. You just couldn't see it because transformation doesn't announce itself. It creeps in one quiet decision at a time. And maybe that's the trick. Heaven doesn't send blessings wrapped in gold. It sends them wrapped in chaos. Because chaos is the only language that wakes people up. You wouldn't have changed if it didn't hurt. You wouldn't have grown if they hadn't left. You wouldn't have learned peace if you hadn't drowned in noise. That's how it works. The same storm that tried to break you ended up baptizing you. The same fire that tried to destroy you forged you into something unburnable. Now when you look back, you don't even recognize the version of you that begged for things that would have destroyed you. You don't crave validation anymore. You don't chase love that costs your peace. You don't explain your worth to people who can't see it. You've learned that silence is louder than words. That distance is sometimes the best answer. That peace is the prize, not the payment. You've stopped fighting for people to understand you. Because understanding isn't required for destiny. Everything that happened was a setup. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every failure. You were being positioned for something you couldn't see yet. That's why heaven had to break your comfort zone. Because you wouldn't have moved otherwise. You were too loyal to your old life. Too attached to what felt familiar. So it had to be taken. You had to lose what you thought you needed so you could become who you were always meant to be. And now, the rebuilding is almost complete. You can feel it, can't you? The calm before everything changes. The strength you didn't ask for but somehow earned. The wisdom that came from wounds that no one saw. That's what it means to be rebuilt. To walk through the fire and not smell like smoke. To be cut open by life and still find beauty in the scars. To lose everything and still smile, because you know it wasn't really loss, it was transformation. Revenge is the easiest road, the most tempting one too. It calls to you in the dark, whispers in your ear, tells you how sweet it would feel to make them pay, to make them regret what they did, to let them taste the same pain they handed you so carelessly. But when you've seen the other side of destruction, when you've crawled out of your own ashes, you start to realize something cruelly beautiful. Revenge is just another kind of prison. It keeps you tied to the people who hurt you, bound by the same pain you swore you'd rise above. It turns survival into obsession, healing into performance. You think you're winning, but you're just bleeding slower. That's why returning isn't about revenge anymore. It's not about proving a point or showing them what they missed. It's about revelation, about walking back into the same world that buried you and letting your existence speak louder than any scream. You don't have to announce your comeback. Your silence does it for you. Because the truth is, the people who betrayed you already know what they did. The guilt lies rent free in their bones. Every time they see your strength, every time they hear your name, every time they realize you're still moving, it stings. They don't need punishment. They're already living it. You see, there's a power in detachment they'll never understand. The moment you stop seeking their validation, you become untouchable. Because you're no longer fueled by rage, you're fueled by purpose. And purpose doesn't flinch.